Okay, so just an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I thought it'd be really, it would make sense to give you a bit of background about the Brain Charity and what we do. And then I wanted to talk really and to sort of put neurodiversity into a context. So I want to talk to you very briefly about where we've come from. And when I say we, what I'm talking about is disabled people, people who are neurodiverse and their family, friends and carers. So where have we come and how have we got to where we are now, and what is neurodiversity? I'm going to talk about supporting people with neurological conditions at work, because ordinarily this presentation on neurodiversity training is given to employers, and it's to teach them about how to welcome and make people comfortable in their organisation. So it has got a bit of a work slant, but I thought that's actually really useful, because what it does is it takes that part of life and it kind of shows you how we might describe the barriers and the opportunities that an individual might face at work. I'm going to talk a little bit about lived experiences as well, and there will be lots of time to ask me any questions you want at the end. So who do we help? So the Brain Charity is there to support anyone with any neurological condition, their family, friends and carers. And as you probably know, there are over 600 known conditions, and they range from conditions that kind of fall in the learning disability category or field, which is things like Down syndrome. It could be a condition that's been caused by a brain injury. So that could be something like cerebral palsy, where there has been an injury to the brain, perhaps during childbirth, or it might be the kind of brain injury that someone has sustained through a violent attack or a car crash or falling off a roof or something along those lines. It covers all of the diseases that can go wrong with the brain, including things like dementia. It includes all sorts of genetic conditions, and they are vast, and we are not experts on any of those. But what we are experts in is the kind of impact of those, and you see cross-cutting themes in people's lives. So our services are built around those cross-cutting themes, and we're talking about a lot of people. So 1 in 6 is what we think are affected by a neurological condition or have a neurological condition. And 30 years will have been around next year. And we've had a couple of different names since when the charity was started. The Brain Charity is our newest name, and we've had that for quite a while now. And the reason we've chosen it really is because it makes us very Google friendly. On those cross-cutting themes, emotional support is probably one of the biggest. And to help people deal with life with their neurological condition, we help people with things like counselling. So for somebody perhaps who is born with their condition, they might be okay with it for certain periods of their life, but then in other times it might be that actually they face quite a lot of discrimination, or maybe they're being the victim of some hate crime at that particular time, and therefore they will need some counselling at that point. It might be that someone's just been told they've got a terminal condition, and so again they might need some support trying to cope with that, or their family might. It might be that somebody has a head injury and their behaviour has changed as a result of that head injury, and they want to try to manage their emotions or manage their responses to things. So we have different types of therapy, and cognitive behavioural therapy is really, really popular, as is person-centred counselling. We have some group therapy as well that's available, and coffee mornings and a befriending service. So that's like a weekly phone call. So there's lots of emotional support there for people in lots of different guises. So some quite intensive and some really light touch. We also help with practical help. So I always use the example of an individual who's had a stroke. So if you think about 45-year-old chap, and he drives a bus for a living, and he has a stroke, and he loses his job. And most people have about 2 months worth of running costs in the bank. So if their main source of income stops, they've got about 2 months worth of money to rely on. That's probably going to go down now. And probably, you know, we'll be looking at people who don't have any kind of reserves at all. And what you quickly see is that those individuals, their whole life starts to fall apart. You know, they can lose their house. Mortgage companies are not very interested in the fact that you've had a stroke. They want to know if you can pay the mortgage or not. And if you can't, then you will lose your house. And because of all of the stress, the condition, the impact has caused, you often see a deterioration of the family unit. And sometimes the friends will disappear a bit further down the line as well, because perhaps that individual's personality has changed and they aren't the same person. So in very practical terms, we can help with things like money. So welfare benefits advice is really, really key. And when I say welfare benefits advice, I don't just mean we tell people what their welfare benefits are. We assess their eligibility for welfare benefits. We support them to appeal, and we go to tribunal if we have to. And we have to go to tribunal quite a lot. We have an employment service, which I'll touch on a bit more later, but essentially that helps people to find work. And we've got lots of different mechanisms for doing that. But as you probably know, people with neurological conditions struggle with work. They struggle to maintain work. They struggle to find work. So that's a really key area for us. We have basic skills courses. So those can be something like maths or English. For some people, they may always need a refresher. Perhaps if they've got a learning disability, doing basic maths, basic English is a really good thing to be doing on a regular basis. Or if, say, their condition in some cases may mean that they've lost a lot of skills. They might have completely lost the area of their brain which would enable them to read and write. And so they may be on their, you know, the start of their journey trying to relearn that again. So the courses that we run they're ongoing, and they support lots of different people for lots of different reasons. We offer a legal advice service, and that covers various areas. We've just recruited our new welfare benefit and employment law advisor. As I've mentioned, it's very difficult for people to get welfare benefits at the moment. They don't make it easy. And in some cases, we have to resort to legislation and regulation to get people those benefits. And in terms of employment, it might be that we are dealing with an employer who is not willing to make reasonable adjustments for people, or the individual may not know that they've got a right to support in work, so we can talk to them about that. We also support people with things like clinical negligence claims, personal injury claims, family law, power of attorney if somebody might have lost capacity. So there's lots of kind of complicated areas that we try to support people through. Carers Advocacy is a Liverpool-only service that we run. That's contracted by the City Council. But for those of you who aren't from Liverpool, if you or your carer needs some advocacy, you do have a legal right to that. So even if there isn't a carers advocacy service in your area, you can ask for an advocate, and you ought to be provided that by the local authority. And we also have staff working in hospitals as well. Again, with the practical side of life, it might be that you come round from the coma and the first thing you think about is, who has fed my dog for the last 3 days? Our staff team are there to go and feed the dog. It might be that you've just received news that you've got something like MS. And so the consultant has phoned us up beforehand and said, you know, can one of the charity staff come up and be around just in case this person needs someone to talk to after the appointment. Social activities. We've all had a taste of social isolation during the pandemic, and I think we all recognise now just how damaging social isolation is. it can impact on your mental health very, very quickly. And for our client group, it is a daily battle. Social isolation is part and parcel often of having a neurological condition. And so we've got several different services which aim to support people with that. And what we're really talking about is bringing people together so they can build relationships with each other and support each other. It's great having a wonderful staff team. It's great having a wonderful volunteering team. But really, I think the biggest impact on people's lives is when they come into the centre, when they come to one of our services and they meet and become part of the community. And I guess that's the same with you guys. It's when those real connections are made, you can support each other along your journey, whatever that is. And we see that happening in things like our art and craft club or our photography class. People come, it's not about the art really though, it's about those relationships. And generally speaking, we have an information and advice service. So this is kind of, people can phone up and ask us questions. We are completely overrun at the moment with inquiries. Most charities are. People are really struggling at the moment. They're struggling to get help. They're struggling to get welfare. They're struggling to get care packages. They're struggling to get their child a decent education. So there are a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails that we receive. But this is some of the information and advice services that we have. All our services are free, and we'll be spending about we spent about 1.2 million last year, and it'll be about 1.7 this year. So although we're still relatively small, we are growing, and we grow each year. And I think in part that is because we are quite innovative in the way that we make money. We run businesses, we fundraise, we beg, borrow and steal to make cash. And because of that, we're getting bigger and we're able to help more people. So that's who we are in a nutshell. So what is neurodiversity? I think I've already mentioned this 1 in 6 people that have a neurological condition. And within there, you know, you're talking about 1 million people who've had some sort of traumatic brain injury, 1 million people with a stroke, 1.5 million with a learning disability, 700,000 with autism. We're not talking about a small, isolated group of people. We're talking about a huge swathe of people. So just like women have been perceived really as a minority in the past, even though we're 52% of the population, people who are neurodiverse, I think, have been kind of put in a particular place in everyone's mind. And the assumption is that they are individuals with a disorder, with a medical problem, and they need treatment. And that is kind of where we've been in the past when we're looking at things like autism, like ADHD. We have a very specific point of view about who those people are, what they're, and how we should help them because they have got problems. If we look right back in history, you can see that people who are neurodiverse, people who have disabilities, way back in time, in some periods were treated as if they were possessed by the devil, and this is what people thought. So epilepsy is a really interesting one, and if you have a look at the way people with epilepsy have been treated throughout history, the first kind of documentation you can see around that is that it was assumed that they were being possessed and taken over by the devil. And you see this right across the board. And actually, I'm bringing burnt at the stake up because I'm left-handed. So one of my neurodiversities is that I am left-handed. Now, you might think, well, it's not neurodivergent. It's only 1 in 10 of us that are left-handed, and I have to live in a right-handed world. So as far as I'm concerned as a left-handed person, I think that should be considered. And back then, I would have been burnt at the stake for that because being left-handed was one of the key traits of being a witch. So being a witch, having epilepsy, being disabled in lots of different ways. There were very, very unusual ways of looking at disabled people way back when. And if we wind forward, we kind of get to the stage where we are becoming a little bit more humane in the way that we treat disabled people and people who are neurodivergent. And we come up with this thing called the asylum, and these are basically really sort of poor houses for disabled people, and we institutionalize them for a very long time. So a lot of people, a lot of disabled children were put into these institutions at birth, and they lived and died in them, and they were appalling places. And I'm sure that some of you will know that some of the stories that come out of the kind of treatment that we used to offer are really quite harrowing. And then we also have things going on like eugenics, which is the belief really that in order to create a race of people that is superior, you need to kind of breed out anybody who is not normal, who is disabled. You need to kind of get them out of the gene pool. They're bad for economics, they're bad morally. We need to kind of dispel them out of our species. After the war, interestingly enough, after the Second World War, and to some extent the First World War, people who were injured were coming back from war. People who had lost their limbs, people who had severe shell shock, as it was called back then, PTSD. We started to soften our thoughts and our feelings about those people, and we started to create hospitals for them to be in. Again, it was about providing care for these people and wanting to give them treatment. And then if we wind on a little bit further than that, then we have care in the community. And we have the idea that people should come out of these long stay residential hospitals and they should be allowed to live in the community with the rest of us. And this is the point that I start my work in this field. I'm a teenager and I started work as a care assistant for people with learning disability. And I worked in these large residential care homes. So they'd be like 25 bedders. And that was normal for someone with a learning disability. They would live in these big homes. And I remember the cook getting very upset when she was told for the first time that she would have to offer individuals a choice of what they were going to have for their dinner. There had been a new government paper that came out talking about these words: rights, dignity, choice, and respect. And it filtered down to our care home. And it filtered down in a way that meant that the cook now had to offer people a choice of what to have for dinner. And she was quite angry about that. And I remember her saying things like, we always have cheese and onion pie on a Friday. I don't see what the problem is. Everybody loves it. Why have I got to offer people this choice? We started to offer the choice for the first time. And for some people, actually, it was a very, very difficult thing for them to get their head around because they'd not been given the opportunity to make decisions before. So they didn't actually know how to choose between cheese and onion pie and curry or whatever else was on the menu. So it was as much a learning curve, I think, for the staff as it was for the people that we were looking after. Where are we today? Well, things have moved on a great deal, but we still support people with all of the problems that are listed down here. So obviously there are physical barriers in the world. Public transport is still a nightmare. There is still not enough information for people about what is on offer, about their condition. And I would say that I don't know about the rest of the country, but I know Merseyside and Cheshire, the educational support for children with special needs is very, very difficult to get hold of. Health services are often I would say there are lots of delays in people getting a diagnosis, a neurological diagnosis. So I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in regards to raising the knowledge levels of people working right across the NHS in regards to neuro. And I think low self-confidence is a really big problem, a key running theme. Poverty, I've touched on that already, because of jobs, because of welfare benefits, and prejudice and discrimination. So those things are still around. Even though we've already been through all of that other stuff, these things are still around. However, I would say that at the moment we are going through a lot of social change and a lot of development and a lot of evolution. And I've put mental health up here, which is different, but it's very interesting to see how good young people are at discussing their mental health problems, how open they are, and how actually they're not embarrassed about this. They're not going to sweep this under the carpet. Celebrities are talking about their mental health problems. We're talking about the menopause now and the kind of ways that that impacts and gives us anxiety or depression. And I think one of the good things that COVID has done is really helped us to have that discussion about mental health and to see it in the same way that we see physical health problems. A lot of us have had mental health problems because of the social isolation. So there's much more awareness and we are much more open talking about it. And at the same time, there's this awakening of an understanding of neurodiversity and what that is. So it was a term that was started to be used about 20 years ago in America. And it was used in quite academic circles and predominantly for the autistic community. And my perspective on this is that it really is a key pivotal moment in the disability rights movement. I think we're seeing something really quite brilliant. There has been the understanding that individuals are often described as disabled, but it's not they themselves that are disabled. It's the world that they live in that disables them. And I think this sentence really sums that up. The reason I can't get a job is not because I can't do the job. It's because I can't do the interview. Our world, our society is full of social constructs that get in the way of neurodivergent people. I keep getting the language wrong. It stops them being able to do what they want to do, what they're good at. We've got all these bizarre ways of being that don't really need to be there. And if I take this to the extremes, a really good example of this is reading and writing. So I'm dyslexic. And although I've worked for disabled people since I was 19, I can't spell disability yet. I keep getting it wrong all the time. And I don't suppose I'll ever know how to spell it, off the top of my head. But I don't really care. I don't like reading and writing. I don't think it's a very good way of communicating with people. I think whoever came up with this code of how to send messages to each other really is an overcomplicated, boring individual. And if it was up to me, there'd be no writing anymore. It would just be video or phone, or I'd come and see you. I know there's lots of people out there that love words and love reading and love writing. But what I'm trying to get across to you is that there are things in our society which have been created in order to suit certain groups, the groups that were in power. And actually, there are lots of other people who try really hard to fit in with those designs, those kind of ways of working, but they don't suit us. They don't suit us very well. And that's not because we're bad, and it's not because we're stupid. It's because we're different, and it's about difference. And I think a really good way of conceptualizing that is me asking you to look at these three faces and asking you which of those three skin tones is the best one. Which one is the good one? Which one is the successful person in that lineup? Now, 60 years ago, you'd have said maybe it's the white person. The white person is the good one. They're the clever one. They're the one who's going to be able to do the most, and they have the highest moral code. But nowadays, when we ask ourselves that question, you can't answer that question. The skin tone is completely irrelevant as to how valuable, how important, how kind that person is. It's irrelevant. And I think this is what neurodiversity and the movement of neurodiversity is saying. There are different ways of being. There are brains that work in a different pattern. And that's not a bad thing. That's not because they are medically poorly. It's because they have a different way. When we deliver our training to employers, Greg is one of the individuals that delivers with us. And he is another member of staff at the charity who has dyslexia. Now, Greg's dyslexia is much more of a barrier to him than mine is to me. He has much more severe dyslexia than I do. And I should add at this point that for some people, autism, ADHD, OCD, dyspraxia, they can really debilitate people. And I don't want to detract from that. This can be very, very difficult things to live with and very painful. And Greg has struggled. He is incredibly bright, but he cannot spell anything. And his math is really, really poor as well. But he's got skills in other areas, and that's why we've hired Greg. He's a fantastic entertainer, and he runs our events for us. But when he talks about the past, he talks about his father, who's also dyslexic, having an appalling time at school, and kind of been, just treated as if he's wrong and it's his fault. He's doing something bad. He's a bad person. Greg, when he was going through school, he had a much better experience. He's, 26, he's young. So life at school for a dyslexic child is better than it was, but we have still got some way to go. I mentioned the workplace, and this is a chart that we would talk to an employer about. And these are the kind of things we would suggest to them that they consider when they are employing somebody who is neurodiverse. There are a lot of things that you can do as an employer to make life easier. You can actually get a support worker for an individual if they need one. The state will pay for that. So we have about 3 or 4 members of staff at the Brain Charity who have support workers, and those support workers enable them to be the best at their job. And often that's not because that individual's brain has a deficit. It's because it works differently. But because we are living in the society we are living in, they still need to answer emails, make phone calls, do all of those kind of things that you have to do. So we have a support worker to help them with those issues. The culture at work is really, really important. And at the Brain Charity, we've got a very open culture. We've got a very diverse team, not just about disability, but about anything. And I think, that is hopefully something that, that all organisations will all become very open to employing people who are right for the job rather than any other reason. But we do talk to organisations about that, about how flexible are they with work hours, about how much training have the staff had around these issues. And then there's tech. There's some wonderful technology out there now that we talk to people about that can be introduced. And of course, this applies to schooling as well. And home life, there's an awful lot out there, and there's more and more being developed every day to help people who are neurodiverse with different elements of tech. We talk to them about the physical environment too, about the emotional side of work and how some people can find that more difficult, but actually that's okay if you recognise that and offer that help. Kind of focusing now on the positive aspects of neurodiversity. This is the bit that I think is really exciting. When a leader or a manager goes out to recruit, usually they will recruit people in their own light. It's a kind of human trait. We all do it. We feel warmest with the people that are more like us. And so what you end up with are teams that are all pretty much the same. And we all know that teams need different types of players. You need creative people to come up with the ideas. You need people who like routine and regimented activity to get work done on a regular basis. You need people who like change. but you also need people who don't like change to challenge any changes that come along to make sure that they're right. You need lots of different people in a team. Varied teams produce better results. And we are starting to understand that now. And we're also starting to understand that dyslexia, that ADHD, that autism can, and not always, but it can bring a different mindset and a different skill set. And a really good example of this is GCHQ. So they have gone to great lengths to recruit dyslexic people quite recently. And that is because they have really good evidence to show that dyslexic people make really good spies. And one of the things they're good at is facial recognition. They can notice patterns in data. So if they're watching CCTV, lots of people, they'll be able to spot the right person in that CCTV. If they're watching patterns in data, say lots of different bits of film, they'll notice that actually that lamp has been in that film and that lamp has been in that film and in that film as well. So they'll make these kind of connections that other people won't make. I used to go out with a physicist. My ex was a scientist, he was a Cambridge physicist, incredibly bright. And we were talking about work and about autism. And he said, well, if they find a cure for autism, our place will shut down in a couple of days. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, pretty much everybody in my department's autistic. And this is a research science facility where they spend all day solving mathematical equations. It's the kind of work that leaves me cold. I would run a mile if anybody asked me to solve a mathematical equation. It would bore the hell out of me. But for some people, they are fantastic at it. And they've got such high levels of concentration and skill in this area that they are sought after. And I would say the other kind of side of neurodiversity and the positivity that that can bring is something that we look for. It's high levels of empathy and understanding. If you are an individual that doesn't fit in to this world that's been created by the powers that be, then you probably have some understanding of other people who have also struggled just to be alive. And therefore, that's why we recruit people who are neurodiverse or who have a mental health issue or who have a physical disability or actually who've really battled in life. Because once you've been through something like that yourself, you become stronger, more empathic, a better, more well-rounded, emotionally intelligent individual. I've put some names on the bottom there. Greg, who I mentioned before, doesn't like me doing this. He said, oh, we always hear about how good neurodiverse people are, but life isn't really like that. It's hard. And, you know, we're not all big achievers. And I know what he's saying, but I actually think that when we're talking about genius, when we talk about real genius, often we're talking about neurodiverse people. You don't have a normal brain and become a genius. These are individuals with absolutely amazing minds. And for anybody's mind to be amazing, it's not going to be normal, is it? There's going to be something going on in there, which helps it to be obsessive about a particular area, helps it to think incredibly creatively. And if you think about business, if you think about art, if you think about science, all the top leaders are neurodivergent. I was really shocked when I started looking into this at just how many, and I know there's no females up there, by the way, everyone, but that's because we haven't come to the conclusion that females can be geniuses yet. But I am working really hard on that. And at some point, somebody will call me a genius, I'm sure of it. So in a nutshell, what I'm talking about, what we're talking about when we talk about neurodiversity, is we're talking about this shift in the way that we think about people who are neurodivergent. And we say paradigm shift because it is a huge move in the way that we think about those around us, just like the move from thinking the world was flat to understanding actually that it's round. It's a really big shift. And I think eventually some of the language will change. So we've got dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, having its roots in Latin, being bad, abnormal, without. This is where these words come from. Because when we think about people who are dyslexic or autistic, we think about their deficits first, because we are comparing how they work in a normal, ableist society. We are comparing their ability to work in a society which has not been created for them with everybody else, which is completely the wrong thing to do. I just wanted to show you this symbol, which is becoming part and parcel of the movement. Obviously, the rainbow is about diversity. You've also got the infinity sign there. I think it's a really lovely way of encapsulating lots of different things. Brains are incredibly diverse, and all of the conditions that I've mentioned, they will span the whole kind of IQ range. They will span the nice person to not very nice person range as well. Brains are very, very complex. People are complex. And I think this symbolizes really this idea that we ought to be there for everybody, no matter who they are, no matter how their brain works. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. I don't know if anybody's got any questions about it. I've said an awful lot there.
Thank you so much, Nanette. Just for anybody that doesn't know, I'm Anna and I'm the support line manager at the TSA. So yeah, if you've got any questions for Nanette, if you want to either unmute and share them with us, or I'll go through any that we have in the chat as well. That was great. Thank you, Nanette. So we do have one question in the chat from Marie. Hi, Marie. So it says, thank you, Nanette. Interesting to learn about the work of the Brain Charity. I wonder how referrals are made and what are the current waiting lists for the support that is available.
Okay, so
sorry, there's two questions there. I don't know if do you want me to wait and say the other one after?
Yeah, go on. I'll answer the first. I'll answer the first few. So in terms of
do you offer online support rather than face-to-face support for individuals and families across the UK?
Okay, so in terms of referrals, there's no barrier to referrals. Telephone call, email, anybody can refer anyone can refer themselves. So it's completely wide open. And there's no form to fill in either. So there is a form online if that's the kind of thing that you like. You can go online and you can fill in a form and that will get automatically sent to us. We can just pick up the phone. In terms of waiting lists, it depends on what kind of support you're after. So in terms of counselling, our waiting lists are actually quite a lot lower than the NHS. And so if you want that kind of help, I think it's probably about 2 months at the moment for a counselling service. If it's employment support, then that can happen pretty much straight away. If it's information and advice, we've got a longer waiting list there because we've got a lot of people coming to us with quite complex cases. And then in terms of online support, some things are available online and some things aren't. So again, counselling is available online. Some of the support sessions are online, some of the activity sessions are online, and some of them are face-to-face. We can offer, if you can't get to us, we can offer a service whereby if we can't deliver something to you, we can go and try and find someone who can. And I would say our ambition is to really, try to offer more face-to-face right across the country and Wales and Northern Ireland and Scotland and the world one day. But at the moment, we've got a centre in Liverpool, but we do offer some things online as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nanette, and thank you, Marie, for the question. So we've got another question in the chat from Marsha, and that is there a gender difference in the ratio of people who are neurodivergent?
It depends, is my answer on that one. So it depends which condition that you're talking about. And I would say that this is a bit of a moving feast at the moment because one of the things we've recognised is that females are much better at masking their neurological condition than males are, and that's probably down to social conditioning. Females are much more guided towards social activities, and I think we have a lot more practice at being around people and communication. And so what we're finding is that a lot of women with autism, a lot of women with ADHD and similar conditions aren't being diagnosed until quite late on in life. And often they are self-diagnosing, they're kind of realizing themselves, and they've worked really hard to fit in, but actually it's all, socializing has always been a chore, or not speaking impulsively has always been a chore. But because they are well practiced and well versed in socializing, they manage to hide it. And that was the same with my dyslexia. Nobody knew I was dyslexic until I got to university because I hid it very well. So yeah, I think the jury is out on that one. When I was studying psychology, I was taught that there are more men at the bottom end of the IQ scale and at the top end of the IQ scale, and there were more women in the middle. Now, I don't think that's probably true, and I'd like to go back one day actually and have a look at what it says nowadays. I know that from my professional experience, working within care homes, that there are quite significantly more males who have quite high level autism. Now, I don't know whether that's because there are simply more autistic men or whether there are more autistic men in care. I really don't know the answer to that, but that's my answer. I think the jury's out on a lot of this stuff though at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Nanette. So John has shared a list of some genius ladies in the chat if you want to
thank you, John.
Those. But we've got another question here, which is, what is the youngest age that you can take referrals?
From birth. Yeah, from birth. Yeah.
Great.
So one of our newest services is in Liverpool Women's Hospital, and we have 2 staff members based there now, and their job is to support parents who have neurological conditions, but also any children being born with neurological conditions as well. And part of the reasons we want to be there is to say congratulations, because we know sometimes parents aren't told that everything goes quiet and it's all a bit sad. And actually, if you've just had a child with Down syndrome, then that's something really to celebrate. So we want to be there for those families who are receiving bad news about a child who has perhaps been born with something very difficult or terminal. But we also want to be there to say, hey, this is a good thing actually, and your child's beautiful and all those things. So yeah, any age.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. So we haven't got any more questions in the chat unless anybody else has any. I'll leave it a little while just to see if anyone else puts any in, but we have got some thank yous in there for you, Nanette. And I just want to agree, it was a great presentation, really thought-provoking and really important to get that message out there. So it sounds like the Brain Charity do excellent things, and it's really great that we can work together, the TSA and the Brain Charity. So thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing that with us. Yeah, so there's more thanks in there. Yeah, thank you so much everyone else for attending as well. Keep an eye out for any of our future events, virtual events and face-to-face events on our website and across social media. But yeah, thank you everybody, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.